When I was in college and graduate school, I rented a duplex from an older couple. They lived on the other side, and the lady that we rented from she was a mess, and she was one of those naturally funny people. And every day when she got the paper, the first thing that she did is she went to the obituaries. And the thing that she always said was she went to the obituaries to look just to make sure she wasn't in there and somebody hadn't told her. And I've never forgotten that. A few years ago, I was reading something related to a commentary on one of the Gospels, and the writer raised the issue, and he said, what do you think the obituary for Jesus would have been like? I never thought about that. What would it have been like if there had been newspapers back in Jesus' day and the obituary had appeared in the paper? Well, from Nazareth, you might imagine that it would have been something like this. Jesus, the son of Joseph and Mary, died in Jerusalem on Friday. He was arrested and found guilty and executed. He was 33 years old. He is survived by his mother and his brothers and sisters. And that would be it. In Jerusalem, where the events took place, there may have been a more extensive article. One of those that people of notoriety get. Maybe something like Jesus of Nazareth was executed this morning on Golgotha after being convicted of the crime of being a revolutionary, trying to overthrow the government of Rome, trying to commit a coup against the government. A dangerous person, a criminal, one that could not be let go, let loose. He had to be stopped because he was a menace to good order and decency. Can't you just see the article being written that way? His disciples remain at large, but are expected to be rounded up and charged with crimes themselves in the days to come. I can just see it. You see, the perspective of those in Jerusalem would have been different than even those in Nazareth who remembered Jesus as a boy. But those who knew Jesus personally would have remembered it in a different way. And their obituary might have been more tender. It might have said something like, our dear friend, our teacher, Jesus, was needlessly, unjustly executed Friday morning. All he ever did was tell people to love God and love each other. He never hurt anyone. In fact, he helped a lot of people. He left his dear friends to mourn his loss. And there'll never be another one like him. You see, because on the day that Jesus died, even his disciples didn't have enough faith to remember what Jesus had taught, that his death would not be the end of the story. Their perspective would depend on where they were coming from, what they had seen, what they had witnessed. And as I read that all those years ago, I got to thinking about that, and I realized, you know what? The same thing is true today. What we think about Jesus really makes the difference in how we live with Jesus within us. I know people, like you know people, who see Jesus as an almost dictatorial judge, who is a person who came up with a bunch of rules and commandments, and we are told to obey those things to the nth degree, or Jesus will judge us. And others who say Jesus is just about love and forgiveness. How you see Jesus depends a lot on where you're standing. How you would write Jesus' obituary would depend a lot on where you are in life. Now, I've also learned something else, that within each one of us, there is a longing for something. We can't name it sometimes. We can't always put our finger on it. That there's a recognition that there's something that's missing. Something that we need that we don't quite have like we need it. There's something lacking. That there's a desire within us, a deep longing within us to feel like we are whole. To feel like we belong. To feel like God has favored us. To believe that Jesus is ready to say to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The problem is, not many of us really feel that way. Instead, we live lives filled with anxiousness and fretfulness and fear. Why is that? The story that we read from just a moment ago is one of the most important stories in all of the Gospels. According to John's Gospel, it is the story that becomes the final blow that makes the authorities at Jerusalem finally decide that they've got to stop Jesus. The story is the resurrection or the raising of Lazarus from the dead. And the particular place that we read in the story this morning has to do with Jesus when he's arrived and he's met out on the road by Lazarus' sister Martha. And she said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." She was angry. She was mad at him. She knew that Jesus had power. She knew that Jesus could heal. She had witnessed it herself. She knew that Jesus could have stopped it if he had just gotten in more of a hurry and come when he had been called, instead of delaying his journey back from the Transjordan area. Lazarus wouldn't have died. She was mad at him. She was angry. And Jesus said to her, "Martha, I am the resurrection, and I am life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live, and those who live and believe in me will never, never, never die." And then he asked her, "Do you believe this?" And Jesus would ask us the same question. Do we believe that? Oh, I know we believe it in our minds, intellectually. But does that always get down and take root in our hearts? You see, because I have this idea that if we really, really, truly got hold of that idea that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and that in him we do not have to ever die, then we would learn to live life without ever having to be afraid. And yet, so many of us live lives that are filled with anxious moments, filled with dread. We fear what's going to happen tomorrow. We fear decisions that we're going to have to make down the road. We're uncertain about the ground upon which we stand. We don't know what way we're supposed to go. We're not confident. We're filled with doubt. And the thing is, because we have a tendency to do two things. One, we have a tendency to go to nostalgic remembering. To think that there was a time in the past when things were better for us, but there never was. That's a myth. We have a tendency to, in our remembering, we have a tendency to forget bad things and only remember good things. And so when we remember, we remember back to good times, and we forget that things weren't any better back then than they are now. We just remember differently. Or we have a tendency to project onto other people what's going on inside of us. We have a tendency to lay blame on something or someone else for the anxiousness and anxiety that exists within us when it doesn't belong there. The fears that we have, the anxiousness that we experience, is within us. It was within Martha. She really believed that if Jesus had only come a day early, if he'd just come a little bit sooner, her brother would have lived. Jesus didn't give her what she wanted. But Jesus ultimately ended up giving her what she needed. Ray C.S. Lewis said that within each one of us, there's a longing for a far-off country. I think that's why we enjoy those old stories, those old fairy tales that tell of people doing great things and wonderful deeds, of heroic acts that they did. That's why we can identify with them. We want an epic story like that ourselves. And yet, so many of us feel like we've been shortchanged somehow. Life hasn't turned out like it was supposed to. Maybe your marriage fell apart. Maybe your career fell apart. Maybe something happened in your past that caused you brokenness that continues into this day. And you can't approach life the way you want to approach it because on the inside something has broken you apart. Something doesn't work anymore. Life isn't what you thought it was going to be. It never has been. The truth is, everything that you encounter, every person that you ever encounter is going to fall short of your expectations of them. It's inevitable. And the truth is, sometimes we want Jesus, like Martha wanted Jesus, to do things that Jesus isn't going to do. And the reason Jesus isn't going to do it is because that's not the way faith works. Jesus invites us to be a part of his kingdom. A kingdom that he is already at work building. He invites us to live our lives in him, to live our lives with a sense of assurance. And if we have that sense of assurance within us, we need not live lives that are filled up with fear and anxiousness and dread. If you're not afraid to die, then you're not going to be afraid of anything else. That's what he was telling Martha. If you can get to a place where you're no longer afraid of death, then you will be at a place where you're no longer afraid of anything else that might come your way. And if you believe that I am the resurrection and I am the life, if you really take that down deep inside you, your life will become completely different than it ever has been before. You will become literally a new person. You will live your life with assurance. You won't have to get up in the morning and dread facing the world or facing the day. Rather, you will be able to get up and rejoice that this is the day the Lord has made. You will be able to say, like the writer of Lamentations said, "New every morning are your mercies, O Lord." That's what I want. I'm not there yet. I'd be willing to wager you're not there yet either. But you see, that's what our life is about as Christians. Keeping on. Paul said, pressing on toward the high calling of Jesus Christ. Forgetting what's in the past. Laying hold of the promises of God. And pressing on toward that high mark. There will come a day when we will be complete and have that life that God has promised us we will have. But part of living life eternal is living life eternal now, here and now, today. Because Jesus isn't just resurrection life in the future, Jesus is resurrection life right now. If we're willing to have it. I want that assurance. I want to have that inside of me. I want to know that I don't have to be afraid of anything that's going to come, anything that's going to happen, and that instead I can have peace and joy that surpasses understanding. It's a gift. A gift that we can have. If we're willing to have it. Are you? In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen.